Loco, the seriously crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC, a proud member of the Beautiful Game Network, and brought to you as always by Icarus FC and Roughneck Scarves. I am your interim host, Mika Burrell. Or am I? Because the return of the king is finally here. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Baki.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Phil Baki, and I'm glad to be back. I'm joined as always by my co-hosts Mika Burrell and Christian Canales. Mika, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for the hosting in my absence, and to the both of you, I can say that I listened to the show and it was weird being on that side of things for a little bit, but listening to the show, you guys did an amazing job, and I felt great about the fact that I was leaving everything in good hands, but happy to be back. So thank you guys for holding down the fort while I was out.
Well, tell us, Phil, how are things? You're obviously a new father. How is baby Corinne? Like, how is that whole adjustment?
She is doing good. It is, day by day, me and my wife live in like 3-hour increments right now. That is just like God. Each 3 hours is kind of its own thing, and how she reacts to, eating and how much she eats or how little, or, whether she's satisfied or not, and all those things. But we did bedtime a little bit before, so it was bath time, bedtime, and then able to hop on the mic while Erica is taking care of the next 3 hours, and then after we record, I'll have some overnight duties, and but no, it's been great. She's healthy, can't complain, and yeah, we're making the adjustment, but I'm really happy to be able to come back to the airwaves.
Hell yeah, we're happy you're back, and I'm sure the listeners are too. So awesome.
Well, thanks for that. And Christian, we've got you as well. Christian, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. It's back to school time, so it's a busy time of year for me, but surviving one day at a time.
How was the first day? Anything crazy?
No, it was pretty uneventful, believe it or not. No. Usually the big thing is like after school, there's like in tears because she can't find where her kid is, and so she thinks we lost him, and it's usually that kind of chaos. But nothing like that this year, and which is good. There's a lot of backstory as to why this year's very hectic, but I won't get into it. But considering I have nothing of note to say that happened on the first day, it's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, that feels like ambitious for the first day to not have any major incidents.
I'm sure someone's gonna like fall down the stairs tomorrow or something because I said that right now, but we'll see.
Well, I'm knocking on wood, and maybe I'll grab some salt and throw it over my shoulder later. But well, guys, we're back, and big episode today because we obviously have a lot to talk about. We've got the loss to Louisville over the weekend, and then we're looking ahead to another dreaded trip to California for Locomotive to face Monterey Bay. But I guess before we get going, first and foremost, if you're finding us for the first time, we're Seriously Loco. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and whatever platform you choose as far as social media, and then whatever you like to listen to podcasts on. And if the podcast allows you to rate and review, and you feel moved to leave us a nice little review, that would be a really great way to support the podcast. Another great way is through our Patreon, which is available, patreon.com/seriouslyloco. And I think that about does it for admin. So guys, I wanted to take a second at the top of the show and just address like kind of you may as well call it the elephant in the room. Just the fact that we did take a week off last week from recording an episode. And we are back this week. I'll keep it really brief, but I just want everyone to know first and foremost that obviously in the aftermath of our reporting around the Richie Ryan incident, there was things said in a press conference by Locomotive manager John Hutchinson that kind of disparaged, I guess, the work that we had done. And I understand that emotions kind of were high around that incident. And obviously this weekend we saw what was maybe maybe not best case scenario, but we saw the return of Richie Ryan to the field for Locomotive, which I think we all kind of collectively thought that we had seen the last of Richie in Locomotive colors. So encouraging signs, at least in the short term. We'll see if it leads to anything on the deal. But the couple of things that I wanted to say was just that first and foremost, I'm so overwhelmed and truly like taken aback by the outpouring of support that we got from you guys who listened to the show. Not in the sense that like we self-aggrandizing or anything like that, but simply from a validation of, hey, like people care about this thing that we do. It is a labor of love. It is, this isn't something that we're making loads of money off of. And by loads, I mean, we're literally making barely enough to like fund some things like, the kits and keeping, the podcast hosted on a nice little site. But those are kind of like the luxuries, I guess you would say, of like what we're able to recoup. So anyways, it is like, it was very overwhelming to see everybody's response over the week. And I think re-energized us as a group because it was a little tough to have something that we do as a hobby, but it's in the name. We take it seriously. Like we do this. We don't want to do like a poor job. We don't want to, be a clickbait rumor site. Like that's never been what we're about. We do analysis, we do reporting. We don't try to create, narratives for the sake of it. And anyways, so first and foremost, thank you all for the support throughout. And then secondly, obviously we've since I consider this matter now kind of done and dusted. Like there is no like ill will with anyone at the club or anything like that. We're just going to keep doing our thing. We're going to keep reporting on this for you guys, keep reporting on the club for you guys. And we feel secure in the knowledge that we did a professional and quality job reporting on the Richie Ryan incident, and we'll continue to try to do that going forward. So anyways, those are kind of my general thoughts on the incident. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but do you guys have anything in terms of just closing out, I guess, that small little dust up, if you could call it that?
Yeah, no, Phil, I mean, absolutely well said. I echo everything you said, and I think the only thing that I would want to, I guess, reiterate, and I think everyone who listens to this knows that, is that we too are fans, and unlike some of maybe the seasoned journalists that we are lucky enough to rub elbows with in press conferences and things like that, last week was maybe more emotional for us than folks like that who are, this is their entire job. So just to see all the positive response was really great, and just reminds us why we do this. So just shout out to everyone who was supportive and who continues to support. So but echo everything you said, Phil.
Cool. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we can move on then to the serious stuff, which we always start every episode with a good question from Christian. So Christian, what do you got as a question tonight?
Yeah, it's surprisingly not a food question this week. Sorry to disappoint, but you gotta switch things up every now and then, It is a TV question this week. It's a nostalgia TV question this week, and so I'm wondering, what is like the most obscure show from your childhood that you like distinctly remember watching? Like, and I mean, like, you can maybe sing a theme song, like you remember plots of like several episodes, and so like, and I mean like obscure, so like not Rugrats, like that shit doesn't count. As obscure as you can maybe get.
Phil, you want to go first, or shall I?
I mean, do you have like I'm tossing a couple around in my brain right now, but
I do have one, and this one's for my nerds out there, particularly my anime nerds. There was a show that I used to watch when I was younger, which it was called Ranma One Half. It was an anime, and it was made by Rumiko Takahashi, who also created Inuyasha. So most people know what Inuyasha is. But this anime was about like a girl who would like transform into a man when like hit with like cold water, or maybe it was hot water, I don't know, and vice versa, and like all the like trials and tribulations and hijinks of being able to do that. And now that I think about it, that shit was way ahead of its time. Like
I would say so.
So like, but it was really like entertaining and funny, and like it's an anime. It's funny. But yeah, I remember watching that when I was younger, and that is very, I think, I don't know, obscure unless you watch anime and you're an Inuyasha fan or anything like that. So, but that was, I think that show started in like the late 80s and ran until like 96 maybe. So, I was pretty young when I was watching that, like watching it after it ended, obviously. So I don't really watch like anime or anything like that anymore though, but for sure back in the day, that was one of those shows. If anyone has heard of it, get at me, because I'd be very interested to know. I think it's pretty obscure, but
well, I guess you kind of, I mean, you unlocked a little bit, because now, does Voltron count?
Voltron?
Is Voltron like, is that mainstream?
I feel like it was if you were born like in the early 80s.
So I was born in the late 80s. Well, and by the late 89, so I was born in the, early 90s, practically speaking, in terms of just like
Yeah.
pop culture I was like exposed to. But Voltron, I remember specifically, and as a kid, because it wasn't on TV or anything like that, but I remember going to the video store and renting a Voltron VHS like consistently as a kid. And Voltron was essentially like the precursor. I want to think, or I like to think, it's the precursor to Power Rangers, where it was like 6 like cougar type animal robots that came together and formed a giant, robot man with a giant sword.
So like the original Transformers as well.
Sort of, yeah. It's sort of like it was sort of that combo, but it was that that idea of like these 6 like different, and they were all different colors. Like there's a blue one, a red one, and like all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of a precursor to Power Rangers. And I thought that shit was just unbelievably dope. Like, because they're out in space and they were fighting all kinds of monsters and stuff. And yeah, so I was big into that. The other one that was bouncing around maybe a little bit later down the line was Angry Beavers.
Oh, that's a Nicktoon though. Like, I don't know.
It is Nick. I know, it's like it just felt like maybe a little more niche, I guess, but
I think it was for like a kid. I think it was like one of those kid shows that was probably like from what I remember, I feel like the dialogue and the humor was like way more adult.
It was very slapstick, yeah.
So yeah, I get I get what you're trying to say with that.
But no, I guess my answer would be Voltron, and then I would because I would like obsessively, I would just keep renting the same VHSs from the video store to watch Voltron over and over and over and over again.
So I thought I had an answer. When I developed the question, I thought I already knew what my answer was, and I was gonna go with a couple of like PBS shows because I was a no cable kid. I was really into like Zaboomafoo, who's like a lemur puppet.
Oh yeah, hell
the
yeah!
show was like hosted by the Kratt brothers. But then Phil started talking about like he would rent these videos, and kind of took my mind in another direction. I remembered there was this cartoon, and it was called Bruno the Kid. And I think Mika's Googling.
No.
Oh, your answers. I thought you were about to Google. It was called Bruno the Kid, and it was about like a kid spy. And I was like inappropriately obsessed with James Bond when I was younger. So anything
Same.
like, yeah.
Totally fair.
So
GoldenEye.
like, yeah, anything like spy related, I like gravitated towards that. But it was like a kid spy, and it was animated, and it was Bruno, like character, was voiced by Bruce Willis.
What?
I don't know that this show was ever on TV. I never saw it on TV. I only saw it from videos rented at the video store. But yeah, he was a kid spy, and he had like his butler that was also like a former like Navy SEAL or whatever, that kind of vibe, like Alfred and Batman kind of thing.
Hmm.
Who would like go with him on his journeys. But again, I don't know that it was ever on TV or that I ever saw it on TV. But yeah, it was Bruno the Kid, featuring Bruce Willis, who I'm assuming probably like produced it or something. Because why else would he be involved with that if he wasn't getting a significant cut?
It's giving Shazam starring Sinbad, Mandela Effect ass show.
Berenstain Bears.
Yeah. No, that's oh man, that was good.
There are gonna be zillennials listening to this. Like, what is a video store? Like, we used to go to a place of retail.
Yep.
Where you could rent and maybe even buy videos if you wanted, and video games and things like that.
And this was before Blockbuster ran all the locals out of business. Like, I'm talking Lion Video, which was a local, like a local store.
Yep.
Did you have a Family Video? I know that was kind of a Midwest thing, Phil.
Yeah, Family Video was definitely around. Although I think Family Video was the one, like when we would go to my cousin's house in Wisconsin, that was like Family Video was where we would go to rent whatever stupid movie, like Slappy and the Stinkers or Super Dave.
Hollywood Video too, I think we had. Yeah.
That was late. Yeah, later on we had the Hollywood came in and was competing like head to head with Blockbuster. It was essentially the streaming wars of the time.
Good times.
When Hollywood Video went out of business, that was when I really bulked up my video game collection that I used in college.
Got them on clearance.
Yeah.
Going out of business sale. Well, I think we may collectively be putting off having to talk about Saturday, guys, but unfortunately, I do think it may be time. The Seriously Loco match review. So, yeah, I mean, diving in, Saturday, Locomotive fell in another 1-0 defeat, this time to Louisville City, the second straight 1-0 at home, obviously with San Antonio being the other one the previous weekend. I guess kind of the place that this starts from, before we dive into maybe lineups and selections and kind of what happened within the game itself, looking at the game as a whole, and Mika, feel free to jump in here, but I think like maybe what was frustrating about the Louisville match was how similar it felt to that loss to San Antonio, where San Antonio and Louisville, two very, very good teams in the USL, up towards the top of their respective conferences, didn't play Locomotive off the park per se, but Locomotive never really like asserted themselves to the point of showing that, hey, we can really like run with a team that is at the top of the conference.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were at home, where you think that we'd be able to garner more energy from the crowd and just try to put on a performance. I mean, especially coming off that loss to San Antonio, where they lifted Copa Tejas on our pitch. Like, I don't know what more motivation you need to put that right in the next game. But yeah, there's just like a, and I know people at the club and maybe even Coach Hutchinson would disagree with this, but to me, it looks like there's just like a malaise over this team that I really don't know how to explain it. And maybe it is just like we keep getting we're unlucky, to be fair. Like, the injuries are ridiculous. Like, 2 more this game, and I'm sure we'll get onto it. But like, yeah, they, to your point, Louisville really didn't. It's weird because they didn't play us off the park. Obviously, we lost 1-0, but they were very obviously well drilled and well, just better in the passing and more crisp and knowing where each other is, and just clearly, like, Danny Cruz has definitely got his hooks into this team, and there's a reason why they're at the top of the table in the East, or maybe, battling it out with Tampa week in, week out. But yeah, it was disappointing to not respond to, losing our Copa Tejas title on our soil, and prove something against an Eastern Conference team when I think this season we fared decently well against the Eastern Conference. So, yeah, just disappointing, and just adds to a pretty barren run. No, not pretty barren, literally barren. We're just not scoring right now. So, just not a lot of good to hang our hats on from this one, unfortunately.
And Christian, I mean, is that where this one feels, or these maybe last 2 games feel a little bit even tougher than just 1-0? Because out of context, you look at a 1-0 loss to San Antonio, a 1-0 loss to Louisville. I mean, that happens, right? Like, that can happen over the course of a season. They're good teams. They can get this kind of result. But maybe, like, the concern is that neither team looked so good that they should, maybe Locomotive shouldn't have gotten something. Like, both games felt winnable to a certain extent.
And like you said, lucky, I think, is, like, I guess lucky is kind of the good way of putting it, because just before that, we had a 1-0 win against Colorado, who is another team that, should be a very, a tough opponent, just going by the beginning of their season. So there hasn't been a team, that going up against them, it feels almost like a given loss, as it would have been for, maybe like Phoenix in the previous years. 2019, 2020, 2021, a 1-0 loss to Phoenix is probably a godsend, because of the kind of things that they were doing to teams earlier, and that's just not the vibe that you get from these 2 teams, especially, if you were to see them play, if you were to take a replay of the game, pull out the Locomotive players and put out another team, you would look at it and say, okay, this is a game that Locomotive can win. This is a team that they can beat, and it just hasn't been the case.
Well, Mika, you brought up the lack of goals, and I mean, we can maybe start with the selection here, because obviously I think what was trotted out against Louisville was, ostensibly a very strong starting lineup, and particularly the front line, Francois, Solignac, Gomez, ahead of, Dylan Maris that we've seen in that most advanced role, Eric Calvillo, who, had that spell of really popping up with some important goals from midfield. But obviously over the last 3 games, hasn't really been there. And despite this strong selection, we saw kind of, I mean, maybe subpar performances from a couple of guys up top, but it really was, it just didn't feel like a functional unit, despite you look at each of the names and you're like, yeah, absolutely, this feels like a good unit. And in practice, it just never really felt connected, I guess, in attack.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, like many things in football, like you look at one part of the pitch and what's the problem here? Well, you look further back than that. And I think midfield had a lot to do with the disjointedness. And actually, I asked John Hutchinson this in the post-game press conferences, are you looking for more from your midfield? Because it seems like a lot of the creativity is coming from wide, particularly Cristiano Francois the last couple games. And I mean, to make this point, like, I was looking at just, the raw numbers, and Dylan Maris takes, nearly 80 touches, and he had a pretty decent game. Liam
Yeah.
Rose just 31, Calvillo 28. Like that is significantly less than what Dylan is doing. And so that unit, while I think it is quite balanced, I don't know that they've necessarily learned the three of them together to play together. And Calvillo was very very complimentary of Liam in the post game presser. But yeah, I think when you look at what's going on with the attack, you do have to look a little further back and see like who is or isn't feeding them, right? But even so, like Gomez had that one like half volley that really was pretty hopeful. He did get it on target, but a tough chance to take. Lucho Solaniak, I mean, there's just a couple of chances I think that Lucho Solaniak is not sprinting to a ball that he might have done a couple weeks ago. He is cutting a really frustrated figure lately, I think, and there's something off about that. I miss Blonde Lucho. I think that if somebody can go ahead and give the guy a dye job, that might be great. And I think of that three, Cristiano by far was the best. And he ran himself in the ground and had to be taken off early. And but I think he was creating as much as he could do, and just no one was following him. We can't have one player dragging us through games like that, or trying to anyway. So I think like I said, I think the attack has its own issues, but then you got to look beyond that too and see what is not working here, because it's all systemic, I think.
And Christian, I mean, we talk about the struggles of Lucho, and obviously with him being the most prolific goal scorer up to this point in the season, and maybe it does say quite a bit about the team that he has spent quite a bit of time out of the team recently and is still the top scorer this season. I think that maybe says that may speak volumes on its own. But the struggles of Lucho in this game, 25 touches, which the amount of touches maybe for a striker not really that relevant, but the thing that I always focus on is like he has one shot in 90 minutes, and to me it just feels like right now the moves that Locomotive are constructing, Lucho's not the guy on the end of them.
Yeah, and I mean he's trying to get the ball, and this might be why he's not getting those shots. Is as the game gets further along, you see him start playing farther and farther back just to get a sniff of the ball, and it's still not happening. And even when it does, he's so far back that he doesn't really add anything to the attack. So it's tough for him. I think a player like him, is his output is really just a product of the players around him, of what his teammates are doing. We know that he's good on the ball, but he's not going to carry it from midfield to goal to take a shot. And in these last two games, we're having a hard time playing that kind of creative football, the passing. Our attacks aren't being built, like you guys have been saying, by moving procedurally, systemically, and sharply, from the back to the front. It's get it to Hines, who gets it to Gomez, or get it to Boehner, who boots it to Francois, who not even to Francois, to 10 yards ahead of Francois, and he has to beat the defender to it. So there's just it's ugly soccer right now.
And so I really do hate to I don't like to turn this into a binary problem, but with what surrounded Richie and obviously the introduction of Liam Rose into that number 6 role, Mika, like it just feels, and obviously we don't see them train every day. We don't see like what Liam is doing, that is earning him the spot, but it feels in game like that pass that Richie is so good at and kind of makes his name for is he's receiving the ball with his back to the attack, like to our attackers, and playing a pass around the corner, which is immediately like picking up the pace of the game. Liam we haven't seen that in terms of him being that pivot between defense and attack and really upping the pace. Like it really has been just more measured and maybe a little more risk averse. How much? I guess maybe the question is, how much of this is Liam getting kind of thrown in the deep end versus Richie, who obviously like backs himself and has, tons of professional experience to say, I know that I can do this. Liam, on the other hand, is trying to, acquaint himself with the system, and it feels so much slower through the midfield.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're making it a binary issue at all. I think those are very fair observations. And, to be fair to Liam Rose, it's been 2 matches, that he's had time to make a mark. And that is, I think, in the modern game, possibly the hardest position to play is that lone 6. And when you're trying to fill the boots of Richie Ryan, who is a veteran of this league, let alone this team, and a player whose trick has always been his mind, and I think Richie will agree with that. And couple that with incredible technical quality, of course. Then yeah, it's definitely going to be different. What I will say about Liam is he appears to have all the tools of a really good defensive midfielder in that his size is really good. He's young. He's got quick feet, I would say. He's very good at like switching it from one foot to the left and trying to change the angle of the attack. But yeah, I mean, just that the vision and perhaps the confidence of a Richie Ryan, is naturally not there yet, I don't think, for Liam, because he's new to the league, new to the team, new to his teammates, new to the country. Been training for several weeks now, but still, he's come from literally the other side of the world to join Locomotive. So, yeah, I mean, Richie Ryan's been the anchor of this team for almost 4 seasons now. I don't think it's surprising at all that there's a significant impact on how the team plays. And yeah, I mean, Richie does come on, but I think we spoke about this maybe privately, that in my opinion, Richie is not a player for a substitute appearance. Like, he's a tone setter, he's a tempo setter that you need from the whistle. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to come on and make an impact necessarily. So he does come on, and I'm sure that was a welcome sight given everything that's happened last week. But it'll be interesting to see how that kind of tandem progresses now, given, the results and kind of what's gone on off the pitch. And yeah, I mean, I think John Hutchinson probably has a bit of a selection headache. And we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, no, I think it's not binary at all. I think those are just, what we're seeing.
And Christian, I mean, going into halftime at 0-0, it kind of felt okay, I guess, as Locomotive up till that point, because it felt like Louisville had the better chances. I think they forced a couple of saves, especially early on, that Locomotive really kind of weathered the storm in those opening about maybe 15 minutes, and then Louisville did drop off a little bit. Locomotive had some chances of their own. But this period right after halftime in these last 2 matches, ultimately, despite Locomotive kind of starting brightly in the second half, ultimately the downfall is that opening 10 minutes of the second half, as that's when they concede again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, maybe I'm being too pessimistic, but like you said, the first half wasn't anything terrible, but for me, it always felt like the best case scenario was gonna be a draw, just because of all the things we're saying. There was nothing to feel positive about, except for the fact that we hadn't allowed a goal yet. And I think that when I don't know that that's how the players were feeling, if that's kind of where your head's at, then you're gonna have a rough second 45 minutes. And like you said, there were a couple of chances, but it it never felt like we were playing to win, and I think that's why in these last two matches, the other teams, the road team, if you're playing on the road and you can sense that your in is not being aggressive, you know, you're on the road, you're playing with house money basically. You just throw everything, especially in the opening parts of the game and the second half, you just throw everything out there and see what happens, and it's gone poorly for us both times. This Louisville one was for me even more disappointing than the San Antonio goal. Coming off a set piece that, you know, to me, I seems like it should have been easier to defend, especially learning after the fact that they scored off of this same play earlier this year. So that seems like it either they weren't well scouted, which I think would be on the staff part, or if the staff did their part, then the team did a good job of using what was shown to them in training, the week prior. So just it was a disappointing goal to give up.
Yeah, I mean, Mika, when you're facing a team like Louisville, to give up a goal from a set piece is disappointing. To give up a goal from a sort of like training ground routine sort of set piece where a guy just runs into open space and this low ball is just kind of like played into the box. The shot itself, like, it goes through a mass of bodies, but it's not particularly well hit. Like, there's really nothing about this goal that is like super well executed, and yet it is a goal for Louisville and a gift that you can't give the best team in the East.
No, certainly not. And I think that judging by the players' reactions to it, they will feel disgusted by conceding this goal. I watched it a couple times to try to see where the breakdown is, and I think, this will sound like an excuse, but I'm just trying to rationalize it for myself. I mean, it is one of those training ground routines, like you said, and so I wonder if, like, the shock of, like, how slowly that ball moved just messed with everyone's timing, and no one was prepared for that, which if you tell me, well, they're professionals, they should be, I agree with that. And it seems like, because it is, I believe is it Jorge Gonzalez who scores the goal, the Spanish attacking midfielder. He runs from essentially the far post position, kind of on the edge of the six, to the front post, the near post, nearest to the corner. And Lucho Solignac is... This is and I'm not trying to dig Lucho out, I swear, but it's just like, this is like the worst kind of ball watching, because not only are you ball watching, but you don't actually get to it. So, you gotta hustle if you're gonna do that, but it seems like Lucho tries to get to the ball, but Jorge is just, more clever and gets there and just kind of like swings a boot at it, and it goes across Evan Newton and into the back of the net in like the most agonizingly slow like roll into the netting. It's just a shocking one to give up. And to Christian's point, about was this scouted, I think, maybe don't quote me on this, but I thought that I had asked John, like, in the beginning of the season, like, when you do film work, is it more about your team or the opposition? And I think he said it was more that he's focusing on what his team is doing. And I know that, he's got a video assistant coach and things that really drill into all those things. But yeah, I mean, I didn't know that Louisville had scored the same exact goal before, so that makes it even more embarrassing, to be honest. But just a terrible goal to concede, and one of those things where like man marking really does you in, and this is one of those things where when people ask like, why do people zonal mark, like, it's probably for goals like this, where there's gonna be a guy there. It's not about getting followed to the ball necessarily. So just bad, really bad, considering how we started the second half.
There's a couple of dynamics going on here too, Christian, as Nick Hines comes out for the, like, right at the end of the first half. He is absolutely like limping to basically finish out the half. And I think we all kind of collectively knew that he'd be subbed at halftime, despite the fact that he does trot back on like after the initial injury when he was kind of doing the sort of like stereotypical actions of I'm coming out of the game and I'm frustrated with my injury, like screaming into the jersey and that sort of like that sort of situation. But Hines comes off, Andre Egalus is brought on, and the disappointment of another fullback injury, then coupled with the concession of this kind of soft goal, which I mean you can see in the players' reaction after the goal that there is just loads of frustration like coming out of the team at that moment, which understandably so, I think. But in the minutes after the goal, and maybe not for the entirety of the second half, but I think, and I think it was the question was asked of Andrew Fox, at least in the portions of the press conference that I was able to watch today after training, about heads dropping after the concession of that goal. And I mean, between another fullback injury, we are now absolutely threadbare. Andrew Fox is ostensibly the only left back healthy at the club right now, and he has been part of our number one center back pairing. Couple that with going behind from this kind of like soft set piece, and it really did feel like the team just deflated. And maybe about 20 minutes of the second half is played out in this kind of like down and like dour state. Like, what did you make of Locomotive, and like how much of this mentality like test, I guess, is really just like it just seems to be getting to the players more than we are like used to seeing over the last few years.
I think that the issue is, we've had so much like adversity these last few years, but somehow we've been able to push through it and be able to say, okay, like, picture this season is okay. Like, we're in a comfortable spot on the table. We no matter what's happening, for whatever reason, we're still winning at home. We still feel comfortable playing at home, all that kind of stuff. And that's not happening this year. I think the results are the difference this year. And I don't think, clearly it's not that these players don't want to win. We know they're some of the most competitive people, in the league. And so the desire to win is there. It's just, it's hard to keep fighting, when you're not getting, rewarded for your efforts in any sense. You're not even you can't even come off the field, unscathed. You're getting hurt, you're getting your ass kicked, physically and, on the scoreboard. So I think that's the big difference this time is the results aren't there. This isn't any of our previous seasons, quality wise, and it's just a new thing for these guys to have to deal with in this stage of their careers. I'm sure many people have faced adversity previously in their careers, but here in El Paso, that them just like us have known only success. And so this is new to them as it is to us.
I'm curious, Mika, of like what the response is. Like what do you in a situation where, I mean, it is like, if I can feel it through the TV, there's got to be like a feeling on the bench of, hey, the guys are just down right now, like, and it felt that way, and it extended, I mean, even into some of the post-match activities of just, you could see how the result affected Yuma, in that interview post-match, and all of that, it just feels like it's adding up to like, and I think the effect can be really debilitating on a team. So how then does, either during a game or now as Locomotive look at this game in retrospect, like as part of this 3-game slide, like how are we arresting this? Like how does Hutch kind of get his hands around this and get this team focused looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the situations I think in the season where it's not about tactics. It's not about first 11s. It's about leadership and, as Hutchinson put it, seeing what people are made of. I think there's gonna, and I tried not to talk in terms of intangibles, but I think this is one of those things that it's like you have to pull together as a team, and we're getting to the business end. The playoffs are still in our hands, but could very quickly slip out of them as, these games in hand start to add up for the other opponents in the Western Conference. And I think it's going to take some serious leadership and some serious looking in the mirror to some of these players who, I'm sorry, have just not been up to scratch. And I get it. We're dealing with a lot of injuries. Like you said, we lost Nick Hines at halftime. And, apparently, I mean, shout out to Joe Rodriguez of the Striker. He was reporting today that Edo Borelli is back in training and holding off on a shoulder surgery for a dislocated shoulder. So, I mean, we're getting into Samuel and Titi before the World Cup vibes.
Oh, no.
Like, that is, do we want to see Eder out there? Of course, but that's also, like, terrifying that this is the lengths that we're having to go.
Yeah.
To not run out a skeleton crew, you know what I mean? Noe Coutinho, he got some minutes, but he's off to college. Like the squad is being pulled, apart all types of ways by injury and by people leaving. Sebastian Velasquez, of course, Richie Ryan, briefly out of the side. Don't know what the future holds for him. There's just so many like distractions that have nothing to do with tactics or anything like that. So it's really going to take some big characters in the locker room to just pull it together and say, let's just play football and play football like we know how to do. Because there's still bags of talent in this squad, and they just need to show it.
Well, one of the players who, I think one of the players who has been trying desperately to take his opportunity and is trying to really show what he's made of is Cristiano Francois, and unfortunately what we thought would be his partner on the other wing for much of the season, Emmanuel Sinupe, suffered another injury during this match as well, and limps off after a very brief cameo, and it looks like an aggravation of this groin injury that I'm not sure if it's the same injury, but it does seem like a similar type of injury, given his history. So anyways, so obviously all the best to Manny, and hope he can come back quickly. But Cristiano was out there. He was the outlet for much of the game. He was the game plan. Like at times it was Francois, like it was just hope that Cristiano could create something. He did quite well. He was absolutely working Louisville's left back. I don't know I can't remember off the top of my head who had the displeasure of trying to mark Cristiano while he's in form. I guess it was Jimenez at Oscar Jimenez at left back for Louisville, but the question mark is Francois has been now for a stretch of games, obviously without adding goals. Unfortunately, he has been kind of the bright spot in attack for Locomotive, and at least someone who's willing to try something. He runs at people. He really tries to, he takes people on, he puts in a lot of crosses, like tries to create things. And maybe he hasn't gotten the reward that he deserves in terms of the output, but he's taken off in this one. And it seemed like some of the explanation for his substitution was actually kind of driven by the injury situation and trying to wrap him in bubble wrap, which the whole idea of Locomotive being at a stage in their squad where they're taking off their best attacking player of the night against one of the best teams in the league simply to wrap him in bubble wrap, that's like, maybe that just highlights what a like tough spot this squad is in right now.
Yeah, no, certainly like a microcosm of the issue is like exactly like you said, taking off your best player. It seems nonsensical, on the surface, but the way that John put it is, he's a long strider. He takes people on. He sprints a lot, and if we lose him, like you know, that's just another nail in the coffin. Or maybe that's a little bit dramatic. I mean, we still have some games in the pocket to go, but yeah, it was explained as trying to protect Cristiano, but to speak of how he actually played, I asked him, obviously it was a tough night for you, but for the team, but you were excellent. You were making a lot of plays, you were taking people on, you were putting in a lot of crosses, just not finding, people weren't getting their heads to it or feet to it. And the way that Cristiano put it, and I think this makes total sense, is that he's bounced around a lot from club to club, and it's just taken him, it's hard to settle when you're never settled, right? And so it took him a bit of time here at Locomotive to settle, because I think, at the beginning we were a little bit underwhelmed given his exploits at Miami, and thinking like, hey, like that could translate pretty quickly, and like that's not how it works. These are human beings, right? So but yeah, he said that, it's just been about settling down and finding his groove, and adjusting, of course, to playing in El Paso. It's different than at sea level in Miami, in the humidity. So, but yeah, I think he was the bright spot for sure. And, this is one of those performances that FOTMob's not going to tell you was a good one, but you had to watch the game. Yeah. He was certainly the outlet, as you said, Phil.
Well, yeah, I think Cristiano, one of the players who can walk away with this, with heads held high, and we spoke about the offensive struggles, and just how I think maybe we talked about the heads dropping, and Christian, ultimately the difference in previous years and kind of like where we are right now is there, and maybe I would say previous years, there had been up until this point a little bit of an air of inevitability about Locomotive eking out a draw or winning a game like this at home, where there was like, hey, we're down 1-0, but still plenty of time. We know that like we're going to pile on the pressure. We know that we're going to like really make this difficult to see out. And a lot of times, especially last season, like I how many times did we pull a result out in the last 10 minutes, or make those kind of like decisive moments. And this one felt kind of in the opposite direction. There was an air of inevitability about Locomotive not getting anything out of the game, where it was like, yeah, we could be at this for 10 hours and we're not going to score.
Yeah, there's just nothing there. We talked about Lucho's struggles, and even Gomez, he's still doing like the scrappy work defensively and stuff, but he's been a non-factor offensively, and so that those are our goal scorers right now. That's who's on the team that can score a goal. Earlier in the season when we were scoring, it was coming from a lot of different places, but Diego has left. Harry Brockbank left, and they took a lot of goals with them on the way out. And so since those two players have left, it's been Gomez and Lucho, and Eric Calvillo has put in a couple, but we've already talked about struggles. So when that's happening, then you just have to lean on those forwards to pull something out of a hat. and it's just not happening.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the departure of Harry Brockbank, and I think it, without getting overly dramatic about it, I think the offensive impetus between the sort of player that Brockbank is, who had his own faults in terms of like defensively, and we talked a lot about that. But the drop off from a guy like him to Matt Boehner, not, and this is no shade on Matt Boehner, but just not, he's not an attacking fullback. That's not how he's set up to play. I mean,
Not
I think
fullback period.
Right,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
his best minutes for us are at center back, and similarly, we've seen like the same sort of impact when Eder, or I think Nick Hines has been extremely unfortunate in his time, and now add an injury on top of that. In Nick Hines could probably have, he could probably be like second on the team in assists if our finishing had been a little bit better on the end of some of the crosses he was putting in. But to kind of put a bow on this one, guys, I guess the end, or sort of the overall thing here is trying to draw the line between, everybody said at the outset of that Oakland, or at full time in Oakland, that the 4-0 defeat, everybody kind of pointed to that and said, hey, this is a fluke. Like, even Oakland's commentators were saying, like, yeah, El Paso's just going to write this off as, you have some nights like this. We know that that's not the team that they are, sort of thing. Put up by San Antonio, lost to San Antonio, followed up by now lost to Louisville. I'm trying to draw the line to like this bounce back performance that we're kind of all waiting for. And between the injuries and kind of the just like mood around the team, I'm finding it tough to draw the line. Like, it's tough to connect. Like, okay, this is where we bounce back against Monterey Bay. Where do we, like, what is it just the, like, hey, let's get back to basics and just focus on playing our football, or like, is that what gets us to this bounce back performance?
I don't know that it's gonna happen, like in one match. I think the next best result we're gonna have is a clean sheet 0-0 draw. Cause like, have you seen the schedule? We have to go to Monterey. All for all intents and purposes, the whole of California might as well be Death Valley for El Paso Locomotive, because we can't do a damn thing in California, so we have to go there. After that, I believe we have Colorado.
Yep.
In Colorado. Then Loyal come to town, and then Phoenix, who are finding form again. They haven't done a lot of score. They scored 4 goals against Colorado this last week, but they've also had 3 clean sheets, in the weeks prior, all 0-0 draws. But they're figuring things out, at least defensively, which right now is to be, to at least draw with us. If you can have just a sound defensive game. Then New Mexico, then in New Mexico, so, which also a nightmare for us. So, like you said, it's hard to pinpoint, okay, this is where things can get better. I don't think that we have another, Monterey opening leg match. I don't think there's a 5-0 on the schedule anywhere for us. So I think it's just baby steps. Where are we going to get that 0-0 clean sheet draw? That's the next step for us, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I concur with that. It's about not blowing somebody out of the water, or just scraping a point, which sounds ridiculous when you think about how before this, we had been on a 10-game unbeaten streak. Granted, half of those unbeaten were draws, and that is, I think that papers over some of the cracks. Sounds dramatic, but just like the inconsistencies in this team, and some of the things that we can't control, to be fair, like injuries and what have you. But I think, though, that even though Monterey Bay are in form, if not for a really shocking, like, post-championship slump, they'd be propping up the table because Orange County are currently bottom. But Monterey Bay, they are undefeated in their last 5, and so us going to California to meet that is not great. It's going to a place we've never played before. At their new place, Cardinale Stadium, I think it is. So, yeah, and I think for us, like, we're gonna be here and covering the team no matter what. But I have been hearing murmurings that this is becoming untenable for some fans, and that's their right to feel that way, but that's kind of just some things that have been through the grapevine, but
and ultimately the job of the team to change minds, and I think
right,
we're, like we said, just trying to draw that line through how I think in previous years we've never really had difficulty saying like, hey, we're in a rough patch right now. We know kind of why it's happening. We can say like this and that didn't go right in that match, whatever. I think in this match it actually is funny because we collectively talked about it and didn't mention the fact that there are a couple of penalty shouts that Locomotive are denied in this game. The key difference being that I think collectively as a group, I think you gotta, especially in USL, we know that like, that's not ever something that you can lean on. And if we had been playing just, really, really well and were denied these opportunities, that'd be one thing, but it would feel almost, not to say the referee should referee the game as it is. And yes, there are a couple of shouts in here, but the idea of Locomotive getting out of this game with a 2-1 because of 2 penalties, that I don't see it, if that makes sense.
I feel like we'd be Terry on the game would be exactly the same. We'd have the same complaints, and I think we'd have the same outlook, honestly. Maybe I'm giving us too much credit, but I think like you said, I think we're reasonable in that when we do get upset about this penalty shot, these penalty non-calls or whatever, like, it's because we really feel like we deserve that win, and that has not been the case these last 2 games. We have not. Soccer's a game where we say all the time, the better team doesn't always win. But better team has won these last 2 weeks. Maybe not the better team by a large margin, but the better team has won.
Can I ask just a question, just open? What
Sure.
do we make of the perceived tactical inflexibility of this team? Because we've never started a game with anything but a 4-3-3. We've seen like 4-2-3-1 kind of play itself out, in the course of a game, especially when Diego Luna was here. And, in attack, we basically become like a 2-3-5, a la like a City or a Liverpool. But that starting 4-3-3, like, what do we make of the fact that is literally the only formation that we ever start with? Is it a problem, or is that, irrelevant?
I actually tweeted during this last game. I was like, hear me out. Gomez and Lucho just up top to start, like not as a like, oh, I've thrown somebody else on and now we're playing with 2 up top. Like, maybe we try them as a pair a few times, like give a little bit different look, like. And I'm not saying, whatever, it would probably be like a 4-2-4 or whatever you want to call it, 4-2-3-1. Like, there's all kinds of different shapes that you can take. And maybe Lucho's ostensibly the 10 and like, but really pairing with Gomez, and you've still got your wingers, you still got your central midfielders. But to me, like, the idea that we're really struggling to score goals and we're going to continue to play the same shape with the same players, like, and just kind of like, eventually it will work. I think there needs to be a shakeup because we've become, And I think in this match, it played out to a certain extent, like kind of how you see some of even the elite teams like look in these shapes when it does become predictable, where a lot of crosses going in, a lot of like where there's not that sort of, link up in the same way, a lot of shots from outside the box. And it's just, I would personally like to see some change of shape and maybe, I don't know. I've always thought that Gomez and Lucho could be a potent partnership. And the idea of, even at this point, like 4-4 fucking 2 with, being able to play some now, obviously with some of the injuries, it makes it a little bit more difficult because you'd like to have the likes of Sanupe and Francois, or, even Nick Hines on the left side, on the wings. But I don't know. Could a case be made for the Lowry Diamond? Like Gomez, Lucho, Mahrez in the 10, Eric,
Liam and Richie and
Eric, Liam, and Richie, and then or even Ander perhaps, and then the back four as it kind of exists. But I don't know.
Just asking questions. Christian, what do you make of it? I'm curious.
I think that, and I don't know, I almost don't want to say it because I don't want to. It feels wrong to say it because, like, what the hell do I know? But then again, like, if that's how we felt about anything we said here, there wouldn't be a podcast, right?
Fair enough.
It seems to maybe be like a little bit of lack of experience, from the coaching standpoint. This is the first head coaching job for John Hutchinson, and so maybe there's just that he just doesn't have that kind of like background to dig into. There's not a lot. He hasn't seen a lot from a head coaching standpoint, and maybe with that kind of inexperience just comes a little bit of like fear or just aversion to trying something, vastly different and making that change. Coupled with, like Phil said, just a lack of personnel. There's only so many things you can do when you have such a shallow pool to pick from. So I think it's those two things.
Yeah, and that was kind of my first thought when you said Diamond, was like I wouldn't hate it, but we would use everyone.
Yeah.
And so that's kind
sure.
of like where it becomes problematic. But yeah, no, I was just curious because we run that 4-4-3 like pretty dogmatically, I would say.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I mean, an argument could be made potentially that we're running out of personnel to run that also. Like, and maybe that's the general thing, is we don't really have the personnel to run any system right now because we don't have fullbacks. We don't have a ton of depth in midfield. Although Miles Lyons ostensibly could be employed in the fullback position to be able to free up, someone to play in another position. I'm thinking just based off, and I know, Mika, this is typically like something this is a drum that you would beat, but like Ander's passing range in this game, to me, he was spraying the ball around from that center back position, and I'm like, I feel like we could, like, this could be useful. What?
Hashtag Ander is a midfielder. Like, don't at me unless you agree. Like, and I think he would agree too, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
The Basque Meshach.
We have, USL's Xabi Alonso. Why don't we use him? Like, geez.
Well, we've dug into this one pretty thoroughly, guys, and I mean, for good reason, I think, because we are trying to pick the bones out of it a little bit and try to understand, this 3-game losing streak to the best of our ability. It does leave Locomotive in sixth position in the West, but it's a little misleading because they are level on points with Sacramento Republic in fifth, who have 4 games in hand by virtue of that U.S. Open Cup run to the final, which congrats to Nick Ross and company on being, I think, the first lower division team to reach the final since Rochester Rhinos won the final in 1999. I think.
Crazy.
So yeah, unbelievable achievement. But they have 4 games in hand, a point, and are level on points. Vegas is right behind us in 7th in that last playoff place. They are only 1 point behind with 2 games in hand. So there's like a very real danger. And even Los Dos in 8th outside of the playoff places, they're 2 points behind us with a game in hand. So in theory, Los Dos could also push us out of the playoff places. And the only teams who have there's only one other team who's played as many games as us, and that's Oakland down in 9th. So every single team in the West above us has played 2 or 3 or 4 less games than us. So the prospect of climbing the table above 6th is over 10 matches is not great. Like the idea of us climbing into the upper reaches, even if we really turn things around over these last 10 games, probably not realistic. So we are really looking at a season where we're targeting one of the last 2 playoff places.
Yeah, and we're playing 2, 3, and 4 in the table in the next 5 match days. Absolutely horrific. And then hosting Phoenix, so I don't ever swat away in my mind because they're Phoenix Rising, despite the struggles. So, I mean, this may be premature, but I guess I'm gonna say it. Like, how catastrophic is it if we don't make the playoffs?
I would have told you at the beginning of the season that it was completely catastrophic, but I
did kind of load the question, didn't I? If you don't think it's catastrophic, that's okay too. But
there's a lot of context built in the meantime that may mitigate things a bit just with the volume of injuries and all that stuff. But I think even in our toughest seasons, we've always been solidly in the mix of playoffs. I think season 1 we were a little bit on the bubble until maybe the last 4 or 5 games. This is the first time that I've felt genuinely worried about missing the playoffs in Locomotive's history. So I think that kind of just speaks for itself.
Christian?
There is, all the context and all the circumstances, but it's rough, I think it is a big deal, whether or not there are the reasons for it. It's still a big deal because this is a team with a lot of resources. So you would imagine that we would still be able to mitigate all of these blows that were being dealt, and it's just not happening, for one reason or the other. So I couldn't personally, I couldn't write it off. It's obviously, factually a low point, but it's just a sign of just a decline, and I know that all of the injuries and all that stuff, being what it is, for me, I just look back on kind of the hope that I had at the beginning of the season, understanding that we were going through all these changes and still feeling like, we've got this, with the reiteration by John Hutchison that this is not a rebuild, which it wasn't supposed to be, but that's feeling like at this point. So that kind of dissonance between those two things is really what makes me struggle to accept, or to accept what may happen if things really go south.
I I think, and maybe this could be a section of an episode all itself, but I'll just lay this out there before we kind of close out this discussion, I guess, is this is more like existential, and maybe even in lieu of a Monterey Bay preview. I'll tell you the Monterey Bay preview. Chase Boone scores a shitload of goals. That's Monterey Bay. Like, he scores a lot, and if we keep him quiet, we might be okay. The thing about this like larger conversation is actually, I think there's a big part of the Hutchinson conversation, the squad conversation, like, where despite the amount of like turnover and the amount of like new players brought in and all those things, at the end of the day, this Hutchinson team was very reliant on Eder Borelli, Yuma, Andrew Fox, Richie Ryan, Diego Luna, Dylan Maris, Lucho Solignac, Josue Aron Gomez. That is really the most like troubling and like damning part of this. Not that those players aren't good players, because I think each of us have a very like warm spot in our heart for each of those players and what they've brought to Locomotive. But at some point, with the recruitment that we've done, there's not many players that have been brought in this year that I think are as like, I think there are a couple of players who have been very unlucky, and we obviously we gave a lot of praise to Cristiano Francois in this episode, and I think Emmanuel Sinupe is one that I think of like, there's this sliding doors sort of season for Manny, where I absolutely think that, barring that initial injury where he was out for such an extended period, I mean, he was our best player when he got hurt. And there's, so there's maybe a debate there. But I think the amount to which we still lent on the players who had been here is then like asks a larger question of like the squad that Hutchinson was building, because it's like, if we're still playing a big core of the squad that was already here, and a lot of the players that were recruited weren't surpassing, like, because we started with a very different sort of lineup in those opening matches of the season where we played so inconsistently and poorly at times. And we kind of just went back to like, this is the core of the team and this is who's going to play. That to me is like more troubling, because it's like, we haven't actually even really taken that next step. Like, we haven't gotten out of the Lowry era in many ways. Like, we are still kind of using the squad that Mark built, and it's just under new management. Like, rather than saying that this is truly Hutch's team and like we've continued to like keep moving forward, it really ended up kind of being like, we're plugging in the pieces that were already here that it seemed like Hutch was kind of trying to move past, but ultimately couldn't, because like the pieces that he brought in either couldn't adapt or couldn't progress beyond like what the squad was already offering.
That is a really good point. Yeah, as you were listing those players, I was like, Mark player. I guess the only one really that is, a bona fide starter is Evan Newton, and
right, and yeah,
that is what it is. Like, he's a goalkeeper
out of necessity in many ways, because I mean, there is maybe an alternate universe out there where Logan Ketterer sticks around, and who's to say that he doesn't keep the starting job? Not to say Evan has been fantastic, ever since those opening weeks, but that's the sort of, and I know that's a tough question to pose at the end of a segment, or not a question to pose, but a tough point to make at the end of a segment, because it's like, it could be its own episode, but I don't know, there just feels like there's something going on there where we kind of just ended up leaning on the same player, like the players we had.
Yep. Well, and the players that are from that, Mark Lowry era, as you put it, many of them are the dressing room voices too. That I know the coaching staff try to speak through and give a lot of responsibility to the Yumas, the Richies. So yeah, it's like it is a rebuild and it's not at all at the same damn time. And like in all ways, it's really just not going well, I think, at the moment. So
yeah,
wow.
It's been tough. I love how we always get existential when it comes to these losing streaks. Like we start off in like tactical mode, but then the scope just continues to widen of like what even is football?
Rene Descartes type beat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can talk Monterey Bay. I know we've been going for a while, but the Seriously Loco match preview.
I mean, it's like you said, Monterey Bay. I mean, Chase Andrew Boone as Fatma. They put some respect on his name by including the entire name. Scores a lot of goals, and Monterey are in the best form of their season, I think, in that they're undefeated in their last 5. Took some pretty big scalps in Orange County. Of course, we know Orange County's a bit of a meme this season, but I mean, drawing Detroit on the road, drawing New Mexico United on the road as well, I think is admirable. So, you know, I'm sorry, that was at home, but either way,
but
yeah, you know, those are good teams, and they were able to hold on for points there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of where we go with that. And you know what's really funny is Fot Mob, this is so American soccer. Fot Mob shows like the head-to-head between Monterey Bay and El Paso, and they show like Fresno results. So like I'm like
R.I.P.
Yeah, it's like we'd have never played Monterey Bay this many times. What are you talking about? Like we played them 3 times in 2019. And I click through and it's like Fresno Football Club, and I'm just like, pour one out.
Yeah. One of my favorite Locomotive matches, actually, that playoff game against Fresno. That was good times.
Yeah. So 3-2. Yeah.
James Kiffey, Thunderbolt.
Kiffey, oh my goodness.
Bolt from the blue. Yeah, Monterey Bay, I mean, they have been in a lot better form, and I think even in the games that they've lost, like they've looked much better. Like they played San Antonio at home to that crazy 3-2 where they forced San Antonio to I think it was a pretty late goal from San Antonio. Same deal with Los Dos on the road. They played to a 3-2. They only lost it, Sacramento was a 2-1 result. And then they went on this 5-game unbeaten streak where, draws against New Mexico, beat Orange County, draw Detroit City, beat Baby Bulls, beat Loudoun. So they take care of business against like the lower teams, and they are absolutely putting up a fight against the teams above them. This is absolutely not the free 3 points that we kind of like took Monterey Bay for earlier in the season, especially given the context of that game, I guess, with the red card and everything, kind of changed the complexion of it a little bit. But it's Monterey Bay side a little bit of a different prospect from the one we faced earlier.
Yep, and again, the travel sucks. California sucks. Like, I think if we draw like 1-1, I'll be thrilled. Which that's where we're at, unfortunately, for me anyway.
Are we going into predictions, Christian? What do you think of this match? I mean, I guess first off, who's even going to play? Because like, is Foxy's going to be at left back? Maybe, I guess, and Boehner center back. Miles Lyons debut. Like, full debut? Is that what we're in for?
I wouldn't put my money on that. I think we're more likely to see either Ander or I'm pretty sure Payares is not hurt. So seeing one of them slide in, because I mean, for everything we say about Bain are not contributing to the attack, he's reliable,
Yeah.
for at that right back to at least not make some sort of grave error. Does he make Yuma's job a lot harder sometimes? Yes, but Yuma is also capable of picking up that slack, whether he should have to or not. So I think that we're likely to just see a center back for fill in that center back role, and you know I think we see Francois Lucho and Gomez on top again, and the midfield. I think we're basically using what we have, with the only question being, does Richie start or does Liam Rose play? But other than that, it's Dylan, Eric, and who else? Who am I missing?
Yeah, I mean Dylan, Eric, and either Liam or Richie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 4-3-3. Yeah. So Dylan, Eric, and so I think that's the lineup we see, honestly.
Justice for Venancio Calderon. I yeah, no, I mean I think you're probably right. And yeah, Mika, I guess the selection dilemma is turning into the selection like imperative, because we basically have like 14 senior outfield players available at this point.
Joe Rodriguez, I'm shouting him out again. He asked John Hutchinson in the post-match press conference after Louisville, he basically said, like, this keeps happening, like, season upon season. Players get hurt, and our squad is already small to begin with. Like, how are you going to address this? And Hutch basically said that, ownership is aware, like, they see what we see, and they do want to, they do intend to invest more. Now, whatever that ends up actually being, like, who knows? But I'm more cynical about it, and I just think that, like, the cap of, like, 23 or whatever it is, like, pretty much, like, standard across USL. Like, I don't know, maybe a Phoenix might have a bigger squad or something, but, that's what Hutch said, is that there's an intention to make the squad bigger, and,
Interesting.
But who knows? I mean, and he did say, the academy is a big part of that, and I think that is, certainly admirable. Like, we want to see the Diegos and the Venancios, the Vinnies getting their chance. So, but yeah, it is threadbare for sure.
And that is a fine strategy until, a player makes an appearance in a game and they're like, this will be his last game for Locomotive because he's going to college to play. Like, it's like he's been making, he's been taking up significant minutes off the bench, or even starting in some cases in Coutinho's case. But yeah, that's I don't know. So I guess, are you saying, are you sticking with 1-1? Is that the vibe for this, or how are you feeling about?
For me, yeah, I think so. I think 1-1 is. I think we won't. I'd be surprised if we kept Chase Boone quiet, just because I just would. Like, I just don't.
We haven't.
Yeah,
we
like,
haven't kept.
Yeah.
Strikers quiet.
Right. So I think that would be a pipe dream, honestly, but we'll see. And I'm hoping we can. I mean, to go another game without scoring, I think things get very questionable very quick if that happens. Not for me necessarily, but there's a vibe. I can't explain it, about just how unimpressed people have been. So, and that's football. Some people can be fickle like that. It is what it is. But
yeah.
Yeah, I certainly am getting to a point where it's like, if we don't score, like, this is absolutely ridiculous. But 1-1 for me.
Christian, what's your feel?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with kind of what I was leaning to earlier, in that I'm hoping this is when things around, but starting with a 0-0 draw, as long as we are creating chances, yeah, we haven't scored, but we're also not creating anything, and I think that is a kind of it starts there. You can't score if you're not creating the chances. So I would just like to see us do something with the ball in attack, and if we end up getting a goal, great. But I'm happy with just an offensive performance where we can look back and talk about it and be like, okay, here's what we did right, because there hasn't been a lot of that recently.
One interesting thing about Chase Boone's goal scoring record is that he has 6 goals this season in 14 appearances off of 17 shots.
Efficient.
That is, to put that in perspective, Christian Valesky leads the team in shots with 25. He has 2 goals. So,
wow.
Yeah. So Chase Boone, 17 shots, 6 goals. He's basically taking 1 shot a game. He's taking like 1.08 shots per game and scoring half the time, essentially, or a little less than half the time.
Wow.
Well, I'm gonna say that, yeah, like draw is probably, that's probably where we're at. The idea of predicting a win in California just seems foolhardy right now. We do not win in California. So yeah, I mean, I'll go with a 1-1 probably too, just because, like you said, Mika, the idea of going goalless again is just too much to take. Because that would make it 4 on the bounce without a goal. So hopefully Locomotive can avoid that unfriendly stat. But it is it's a tough period for Locomotive, despite the fact that obviously it is only, you look at it in isolation, only 3 games, but this 10-game unbeaten run that they went on, like we said, 5 wins, 5 draws, was sort of meant to turn the season into something resembling, what we'd become accustomed to at Locomotive. And instead it's been met with another streak that is sort of resembling the beginning of the season, not in the sense that they've been, defensively shaky, because I don't think that's been really the issue. It's been almost the opposite, which almost is more troubling, because it's like, well, we solved one problem and have another. So anyways, Locomotive looking to bounce back against Monterey Bay. They are a lot tougher team than the one that we faced in the 5-0 earlier this season at the SWUP, and we'll hope that Locomotive can get back to winning ways, but they'll have to shake off some serious California hoodoo that has kept them from getting basically anything in the Bear Republic. I think that about does it. I know this is probably a little bit of a chunkier episode than what we've. So
we're a 3-piece again.
Yep,
Hallelujah.
we're back. We're back, and yeah, glad to be back and talking Locomotive. It does feel good. Hopefully cathartic for anyone listening too, because I know we're all kind of collectively working through some of the frustrations around the recent form. And obviously we'll still be around, like Mika said. We'll be around regardless. Win, lose, or draw. We're still here, and we'll keep covering the team. And if you want to keep up with it, you know where to find us. All the major podcast platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Hit us up there. Check out our Patreon if you haven't yet. And to those who are waiting for their kits, we're I think like 2 weeks. We're 2 weeks into the production, so we've got a month or month and a half till shipment, and you'll start seeing those, which I'm still super excited to get one in my hands and to rock that, because it'll be pretty awesome. And thanks to everyone who participated. I think it'll be just a cool sign of, I think I saw a couple of people online talking about how it's just a cool representation of this little community of Loco fans, and yeah, I'll be super excited. The first time I see one on an ESPN Plus broadcast, I may just about faint. So so yeah, just very excited to see everybody be able to represent and bring this little community together. So thanks everyone for listening. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time when we're talking hopefully about a win against Monterey Bay, stay Loco.